And I'm still finding myself drawn back to that dream of going and becoming a dentist.
Cool. What's it cost?
But yeah, that's the thing. $450,000.
It costs what?
If I'm being honest.
It costs how much?
$450,000.
No, it doesn't.
That will.
No, it doesn't. Not even close. You're double at least. No way it costs $450,000 to go through dental school.
All right, let's find out how much dental school really costs and how much debt we're actually talking. Stay tuned. Hello everyone, and welcome to another One Mission DMD video. If this is your first time here to the channel, this channel was made for anyone interested in a career in dentistry, no matter what part of the journey you may be at. So if that's something you think you can benefit from, please consider subscribing to the channel and liking this video for future content. Okay, this is probably one of the most controversial topics that comes up regarding dental school. We're going to cover why student loans are structured the way they are for college and university students, and why dental schools are charging so much. So let's get straight into it. Now, there's a lot of surprises that come into play when it comes into dental school, and student loans are just the beginning. And it's something that's going to actually carry on to even when you start working in the field after school. So with all due respect to Mr. Ramsey, he's gravely mistaken in this situation. I know it's been 3 years since that video's been posted, but I'm sure he probably learned that he was wrong. Since I'm a current dental student, I do have some understanding in terms of how the debt works and how much schools are charging, but it definitely required me to do a lot of research to make this video so I can present all the facts to you guys so you can make a decision that's best for you. So I actually went ahead and made a list of all of the schools with the in-state tuition and out-of-state tuition charges that they were charging. I just used the book, The Official ADEA Guide to Dental School, and from it, I compared the in-state and out-of-state tuition prices that the schools were charging. So I actually made an Excel sheet, and I know a lot of people have done this, but there's a special reason for why I did it, and I'll explain in a sec. So I went ahead and made a list of all the US dental schools, and in the table, I made different columns where it shows the different in-state and out-of-state tuitions that these schools charge. Now, when people ask the average amount of money it takes to go to a dental school, you're always gonna get an inaccurate number. And the reason for that is because most schools have different tuition rates for in-state and out-of-state students. So if you're comparing one school and you see that in-state student is getting this much tuition charge and an out-state student is getting this much tuition charge, you're averaging those two to see what the national average is, which just doesn't make any sense. So because of that, I was actually curious and made two separate averages. Well, for the average out-of-state school tuition, schools charge is just below $400,000, so it's at $398,000. The average in-state school tuition is $275,000. So as you can see, there's a huge difference between the two numbers just comparing in-state and out-of-state. This is the list of the 10 schools that are the most expensive in order. So University of Illinois, University of Nevada, Las Vegas, New York University, University of Washington, Ohio State, University of Southern California, Roseman, Utah, Midwestern in Chicago, South Carolina, and University of Pennsylvania. So the 10 cheapest schools in order are Puerto Rico, Texas A&M, San Antonio, Houston, Creighton, Marquette, UCLA, Missouri, UNC, and Lake Erie. So I went ahead and made some other columns of things that I really thought would have been interesting. The spreadsheet that I made is actually going to be in the description for anyone. So this is what I did. I wrote the school, the in-state tuition, the out-of-state tuition, the difference between the in-state and out-of-state tuition for each school, the top 10 most expensive schools, the top 10 cheapest schools, and then the schools with the least differential between their in-state and out-of-state tuition charges. One of those interesting facts that I came across was that Ohio State University was one of those schools that offered cheaper tuition charges for in-state students. Now, ironically, I found out that that school was also charging one of the highest tuition charges for out-of-state students. So It was very interesting to know that one school can be on the list for being one of the cheapest and the most expensive tuition charges, depending on if you reside in the state or not. Obviously, super important to look into how much these schools are charging to help you make your decision. But please don't let that be the only criteria you're using to make the decision for yourself. The other thing you have to pair with that is the amount of in-state and out-of-state acceptance rates for each schools are. So, for example, if you're looking at the Texas schools and you're like, oh yeah, they're super cheap, let me apply, but you live in Oklahoma, you'll soon find out that Texas schools only admit 1 to 2% of the entire application pool into their school. So you definitely need to do both. You need to see which one's the cheaper option for you and which one has more out-of-state acceptance rates for you if that's what you need to do. So now, what do all these numbers and the averages mean per year? Most public schools charge anywhere from $30,000 to $60,000 a year, while private schools charge anywhere from $30,000 starting point up to $127,000 a year. So a private school charging $80,000 to $90,000 a year today charged $40,000 to $50,000 in 2010, the same exact school. So if that private school was charging $40,000 to $50,000 in 2010, imagine what public schools were charging in 2010. So that's just putting it in perspective in terms of how everything's been changing and how costs of attending dental school have been inflated so much. This last decade, from 2010 to 2020, has been the monumental year for private schools emerging into the space and charging very high amounts of tuition compared to what they were doing just a decade ago. The question comes up, why are dental schools charging so much to attend their dental programs? Through my additional research, I came across the Student Loan Planner, and it's a YouTube channel and a website where you get to kind of really sit down and plan out your entire loans that you're going to be working with and the best way to pay it back, no matter what healthcare career you may be in. So I really recommend you guys checking it out. It's really cool and really can help you understand if what decision you're about to make is a good one for yourself. Why do dental schools charge so much? According to Student Loan Planner, the simple answer is because you're still going to apply. And it's so true. If people had the option of going to a cheaper dental school, trust me, they'd do it. No one's willingly going to go to a more expensive school if they get into a cheaper option. The fact is that the admissions criteria for these in-state schools is somewhat more than the private schools. They offer cheaper tuition, but they also have one of the higher statistics needed to matriculate into their program. So you need a higher GPA, you need a higher DAT, you name it. Now, the way that these loans work is that there's two types of loans. One is the direct unsubsidized loan, and the other is the Grad Plus loan. So the direct unsubsidized loan is capped at a certain amount for the student to borrow from the government within a given year. Now, the private schools especially are charging more than that cap that the direct unsubsidized loan offers to the student. So that's when the Grad Plus loan comes in, and you're able to get more money to compensate for the remainder that you need for that year. With the Grad Plus loan, it's actually no limit. So this is where it comes into play for why dental schools are able to charge so much, because they know whatever amount they would need more of, the Grad Plus loan is going to cover it, because whatever amount you get is based on the credit of the borrower. So going back to Dave Ramsey.
$450.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does, Mr. Ramsey. He did mention in subsequent videos to people to consider going into state schools, and that's great advice. However, the fact of the matter is, if somebody got into an out-of-state school, and only an out-of-state school, chances are if they apply again, they probably won't get into that in-state school again. It's not a guarantee, but it's very likely, unless you get really lucky. And it takes thousands and thousands of dollars to even apply to these schools. And it takes an entire year for your application to be completed and looked at. So the entire application cycle is a year. It's not like they do it twice a year or something like that. Now, if you do decide to reapply, you're withdrawing from, you're declining an acceptance. You're declining an acceptance for a school that offered you an invitation to be part of their program. Now, if you apply to that school again in hopes to getting into a state school, guess what? You're probably going to get ghosted by that school that you got into first. Because if you're going to apply again to a school you got into but decline the acceptance, that just doesn't look good. So it's a very tough spot to be in. So as you can see, there's not too much positive outlook regarding student loans. What I can recommend is what Dave Ramsey said. If you take it seriously and really do the best you can in undergrad and really commit yourself and try to get the highest DET score possible, that's the formula for being able to get into a state school. But at the end of the day, even if you have those stats, take Texas for example. I'm from Texas. There was 3 schools at the time when I applied. There's a 4th one opening soon, but it's not open yet. And each school is around 100 students or so. So let's do 300 students, and there's 3,000 plus applicants for all the schools in Texas. And that is excluding all the people that are applying to Texas schools outside of Texas. So even if you have the stats, chances are you might not get into those programs because the seats are limited. So the people that are going to be qualified for the seats is going to outnumber the seats that they have. So that's the problem. Also, no matter what kind of debt you'll be getting yourself into, it's super critical to have a plan. You got to start cranking the numbers. You got to look into how much money you can make as an associate and how long it would take you to pay off that debt. Then you could even compare how long it would take you if you're interested in investing into a private practice. How long would it take you to get out of debt and stuff like that? So you really just got to do the research. You got to compare. Fact is, it's never too early to do this research, but it can be too late if you don't educate yourself and learn about these things ahead of time. A really good resource that I would highly recommend any pre-dental student or current dental student to look into is the Shared Practices podcast. They help you navigate through whatever loan process that you may be in, no matter what type of debt you may have, and no matter what your goal with the career of dentistry is. If it's private practice, associateship, whatever. They compare it all, they sit down, they talk about all the facts. They recommend to you what you need to do depending on what your plan is. I've been listening to it before I got into dental school. I'm listening to it even more now, so I highly recommend you guys to check it out. Anyways, this was just an informative video. I hope it was helpful. Don't forget to check out the Excel spreadsheet that I got in the description for you guys to look at. I'll also put a link for the video that Dave Ramsey was speaking to a prospective dental student regarding his loans. And yeah, that's it for this video. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.